Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Corey Webb, and I'm a marketing director here at Churn Zero, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar titled The Path to Customer Success Mastery, Advanced Strategies and Tactics. Before we get started, I do want to remind you that we are recording this session today, and we will be sending out a link to the recording to everyone tomorrow via email. Throughout the presentation, though, we do want to welcome you to submit your questions via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll address as many as we can towards the end of this webinar. Now, I'm pleased to introduce to you our speaker today. We have Peter Armaly, who is at ValueWise, which is a consulting company that helps B2B enterprise tech companies design and operationalize a multi-product customer lifecycle that drives customer adoption, retention, and expansion. Peter also published a book earlier this year titled Mastering Customer Success: Discover Tactics to Decrease Churn, Expand Revenue. And you can buy that on Amazon today, so I definitely recommend checking that out. And he'll be talking to us about that topic in today's presentation. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Corey, and thanks for the invitation to speak to the Churn Zero audience. It's been a while since I've been in front of this crowd, but I'm thrilled to be back. So just a little bit about myself. Corey mentioned about the book, which is taking up half the screen, and not to confuse you all that this entire hour is going to be a commercial for the book, but it is the hour is the basis of the hour is really the subject of the book, and how do you summarize a book of 150 pages in an hour? Well, I'm going to try and make my best effort. Corey mentioned I work for ValueWise Consulting, and we really focus on helping companies optimize the customer lifecycle. And you can see where I worked previously, lots of different roles and lots of different companies, software vendors, but also going back many years ago, working in IT at a variety of Canadian large enterprise companies. All that to say, I only list those things to let you know that tons of experience in a lot of different roles in an enterprise, not strictly in customer success. In fact, I've only been in customer success for the last, formally, probably about the last 15 or 16 years. Sounds like a lot, but in my entire lifespan of my career, that's only a fraction of it. And but I love it. I love being in customer success. I like being really involved in creating customer outcomes that really drive their business forward. And that's really the genesis for wanting to write this book with Jeff Marr, who is listed on the screen. When you get the presentation, click through on him or just look him up on LinkedIn. He and I did not know each other 1 year ago. It's actually 1 year ago exactly, in September, that Pact, the publishing company based in the UK, largely populated by employees in India, contacted each of us individually and said, hey, we want to branch out from our kind of core discipline of writing programming language technical manuals. And we think customer success is the gateway to business. And I thought, oh, isn't that a brilliant kind of tagline? That's how I think of it too. And so I said, tell me more. And they did. And they elaborated on what they want to do. And they have a project and they have a co-author. And would I be interested? And I said, sure. So we kept going. Had conversations. Jeff and I hit it off immediately. He's an individual contributor working for LinkedIn. At the time, I was working at ESG, consulting company, and we just cooperated and collaborated and fit the vision for Pact that they wanted a book about customer success written from a different point of view. And so I'll show the next slide because I kind of elaborate on that. So the book is really written for CSMs primarily, although it's appropriate for leaders to consume as well, because my background is mostly leadership now. And so the way I write about customer success is really from that lens. But I have a healthy respect for individual contributors. And Jeff also, of course, being an IC, really balanced that perspective out. And I think the book works well to really address what we think was a gap in the market for books. Most of the books you find for customer success in the market are usually larger, kind of high-level strategic kind of books written for leadership, for executives or kind of lower-level leaders. How do you build an organization. What kind of metrics do you use? How do you kind of fit your metrics into the kind of overall governing of the company, and KPIs in that regard? And so we thought there's a missing piece here, because we have in customer success really excellent vendors of education, providing good training and education for CSMs, but no one is really writing a book or books for directly speaking to CSMs about their role, the passion they might have for customers, the angst that they suffer from in their role, and any aspiration they have, how they want to grow in their role, from an IC to a leader. And so that's what we try to do with this book. And so you see on the screen, what I'm trying to do with this presentation is take the book that's written for ICs and kind of create a message for leaders, what they can take from the book and apply it in the way they work with their teams. And so we talk a lot in the book. There's 10 chapters, 5 written by me, 5 by Jeff, and they're very complementary. And so what I'm hoping to do in this presentation is talking about how leaders can think about, from the book, strategies and tactics, the fundamental tasks that customer success is responsible for, and why they are the way they are. Why did they come about, and how they work. Any roadblocks, this is a significant kind of issue for customer success, because you have roadblocks with customers, but you also have roadblocks internally. And so roadblocks is a significant kind of topic customer success managers need to continually grapple with. And so as a leader, you need to figure out how you can help your teams. And we talk in the book about that means you have to be excellent at providing clarity of communications, holding others accountable, and teaching your team how to deliver with precision. And then finally, coaching leaders who report to you as a leader. So say you're a director or a VP of customer success, you have leadership team underneath you. And how do you get them to get the most out of the organization, or the people in the organization? It means you have to be able to inspire people, respect what they do, and be able to act as a consistent conduit of the executive leadership team and corporate strategy down to the teams. And so that's what this presentation is going to hopefully kind of glean for you as we go through. So when I was building this presentation, I thought, what better way to be relevant and timely than to ask AI to help me out here? So I asked Claude from Anthropic to read the book. Please read the book, sum it up in 5 themes. And I said, oh, by the way, don't just regurgitate the table of contents. Apply some intelligence to this, and give me what you think the 5 themes of the book are. And it did it in 15 seconds. Pretty impressive speed reading, I thought, and it was accurate. I actually looked at what it produced and was pretty impressed. So these are the themes that it came up with: the evolution of customer success, building strong foundations for customer success, data-driven customer success strategies, optimizing the customer journey, and the future of customer success. And I thought those are good encapsulations of what we talk about in the book over 10 chapters. So just starting with that first theme, and I'm going to kind of glance away sometimes when I'm speaking to you, because what I also asked in subsequent queries, or prompts, I should say, to Claude was elaborate in each of these bullets, each of these themes, particular bullets you would take to support your point of view that this was a major theme. And when you do that, also include maybe a passage or a sentence or a little kind of quote from the book to support that point. And so for under the evolution of customer success, it came up with shifting from, these are kind of things that we should all know over the course of the last 20 years. Customer success was started as a reactive service, and arguably many people are still stuck there. But mostly though, I would say customer success as an industry has universally adopted the stance that it needs to be proactive rather than reactive. And so the processes that are being put in place, the strategies that are being developed and rolled out are really focused on providing proactive service to customers. And from the book, AI says, well, there's a quote that says, CS can't continue engaging customers and delivering service the way it's largely been done in the past. It's just too expensive. And despite numerous examples of individual excellence, it was a model that, for most companies, failed to deliver reliable and accurate proactive guidance to most customers. So that's what we wrote about in the book. We elaborated quite a bit about why reactive models do not work for customer success, because it doesn't work for customers. Even though on the surface, it might seem that way, customers are happy when things are solved. It's a waste of time and money for companies to service customers that way, because it doesn't provide any kind of systemic improvements over time. And ultimately, customers get frustrated with that type of service. So leveraging technology and data analytics to scale personalized service, AI found a quote, relying on advanced technologies such as AI, Gen AI, data analytics, chatbots, and VR, CSMs will be far more equipped to handle more customers because the arduous and error-prone manual processes of today for gathering data and preparing insights will disappear. I think that's safe to say as we continue to see improvements with generative AI and LLMs growing more sophisticated and companies developing their own language models. I think we'll see the day, we probably already are seeing it, where a lot of this kind of work to search and find and cobble together insights on your own will disappear. Third, the moving towards measurable outcome-focused strategies. The quote was, attribution will rule. That's something some have argued for well over a decade, that this is what CS should have been building into its architecture and its culture all along. And some of those people are me. I've been saying that for a long, long, long time, that if customer success wants to guarantee its future as a critical component of a business, it needs to be able to measure the work it's doing and measure its impact on the product that it produces, which is customer outcomes. So we see that developing more and more as customer success evolves over the last, I would say primarily the last 5 years. There's more of a focus on creating that attribution. Adapting to changing customer expectations in the subscription economy. The quote is, if you want me as a customer, you need to be able to understand how to provide me with what I need at the moment I need it and the way I prefer to receive it. If you can't do that, I'll just go somewhere else. This is, I like to think it, or like some people might think of it as a cliche, that subscription economies created a lot of fickle consumers, but I think it's a justifiable kind of response of customers to demand more from vendors. And because there are lots of options available, and so it's should be forcing vendors to double down on their focus for providing really good service. And finally, under the evolution of customer success, balancing human touch with automated processes. Balancing human touch in the age of wondrous advanced technology, conducting business at scale does not mean it has to be impersonal, detached, and cold. And so we elaborate in the book on ways that personalized service can be delivered to large populations of customers through customer success. So, yeah, okay, I'll just move forward. I don't want to take too much time on one slide. Okay, so building strong foundations. This is the second theme that it came up with. So developing essential soft skills like empathy, communication, relationship building. The quote is, the most often referenced soft skill associated with CSMs is empathy, the awareness of others' emotions and placing yourself in someone else's situation to more fully appreciate their perspective. This is really kind of probably the most well-known attribute of customer success managers. And while we should applaud that because empathy is super critical to making sure customers feel some connection, that the vendor cares about them and that the vendor cares about them receiving value for their investment. Empathy will play a prominent role in customer success as it grows to scale to address service for all customers. And while that might be counterintuitive, because how can you be empathetic to 5,000 customers? I think science will help. I think AI will help. I think the ability to kind of understand customer patterns of behavior will become easier. But in order to turn that into really good service, it's going to require people to have good empathetic skills, to see the insights within those patterns of usage and social media behavior, to understand what kind of strategies they should be employing to refine their outreach, to refine the service that they're delivering. So that's what we mean by empathy, one of the strong foundations for customer success. Second one is gaining deep product and industry knowledge. We said in the book, a foundational knowledge of the company's product portfolio, something you will be assigned to support. And this is something that is controversial in some areas. Some CSMs are concerned when we talk about product and industry knowledge that it's just too much. It's too much to expect. There's no escaping that customer success managers need to have this. It's because it's what customers expect of representatives who are speaking with them from the vendor. They do not want to have to get the runaround, which too often happens. And so there's really no way to avoid CSMs from needing to understand the product at a significant level, enough so they can answer questions in the moment. No one's expecting them to apply patches. No one's expecting them to understand why things are broken. But they do they do have a belief that CSMs should be able to answer questions about the business value of the solutions that they've invested in. Understanding customer business goals and desired outcomes. Know your customer and know their business goals for the product solution. Conduct independent research, consume account information that sales documented during the acquisition process, and study the work of other CSMs who previously worked with the customer, if applicable. So this is a good example from the book how we can get pretty low level with the guidance that we provide to the reader. And so we can go, in the book, we go quite high and we go quite low, providing you information, ideas, and recommendations on how you can conduct yourself. And as if you're a leader on this call and you're reading this and you're thinking, okay, that's good, the CSM should be good at that, but you have a responsibility to make sure that that happens. You have a responsibility to make sure that the environment is such that they have the time and the ability to research their customers and put together a plan based on the customer's goals and the desired outcomes and the environment that they're trying to struggle through. Fourth one, creating and executing success plans aligned with customer objectives. This is really a no-brainer now. Every customer success organization should be developing success plans and delivering those and working with them with customers. And we say establish with the customer a co-developed success plan that documents their desired business outcomes and associated milestones. This is a really solid plank in the foundation of customer success. If this plank is missing, I would argue that you're not doing customer success. I think you're setting yourself up for a lot of heartache and failure, and the customer's probably going to churn if there's no plan in place for them to achieve their goals. Remember, customers, when they come on board, that's the moment they're most inspired to do something with the vendor. They're excited to get the product, they get onboarded, and they're ready to go. There needs to be a plan for them that describes a vision for what the final result will be for them, and then they can agree to march along towards that. The final one under building strong foundations is establishing effective internal partnerships across the organization. This is something that a lot of teams struggle with, but building relationships with the product and engineering teams is crucial because it bridges the gap between customer experience and product development. There's lots of ways that this can happen, but the important point is to make it happen. There's lots of tactics that we talk about in the book, but the important thing is to remember that if that relationship is missing, if it's to the disservice of both parties. Customer success has missing knowledge about the product, but product and engineering teams are out of touch with the real life of customers that are using the product. It's much harder for them to gain that information without an organization like customer success, which is regularly tapped in to the customers. Data-driven customer success strategies. So this is the third of 5 themes. So the first one is leveraging customer data to drive internal improvements and external value. And what we mean by that is that oftentimes when people think of customer data, they think of it as a means for customer success managers to learn what's happening with the customer, what kind of, how far along are they in their adoption based on the product usage or the health scores and that sort of stuff. And that's all important. But we take it much further in the book, and we say those are great because you can turn those around and help the customer improve their adoption of the product and make their way and achieve certain milestones and eventually achieve the outcomes that they desire. But we argue that that's just half of what customer success should be doing. The other half is the internal piece with that information. And that's driving those that information via insights to organizations that would benefit from that information. And that would be obviously product. We just mentioned that, but marketing too. Marketing would benefit from customer insights that are gathered by customer success, because then they could refine their messaging to the market that make it much more precise based on what they're learning about successful customers already having achieved outcomes. They could provide much more pinpoint messaging to target certain segments in the market. So that's marketing, but sales themselves could benefit tremendously from insights gathered by customer success and programmatically flowing to them. And then they could help to continue to refine the way they reach out to the segments in the market and make sure that the customers, the prospects they're working with, actually fit the ICP. So the ICP, the ideal customer profile, is something that I believe all organizations should be participating in its creation and refinement of. It shouldn't just be left to marketing and sales to do that, because they're missing the major piece of it, which is information about the existing customer base and whether the ICP is something that is playing out in the market and its market, or has the company strayed from the ICP, and why is it straying? So stuff like that. So that's what we mean by internal and external value of customer data. Implementing health scores and other key metrics to assess customer status. The quote is customer health score. This is an algorithmic generated score that looks at a wide variety of signals or clues about the individual account. Very simple, but very powerful. We are big believers in health scores. I know there's a lot of controversy about health scores. A lot of people want to just throw them in the garbage. And my rebuttal usually is, and then what? Then how would you know what's happening with your customer? And so health scores is something we really believe in, but they're not easy. And so they require work. They require a lot of study, a lot of important kind of testing. And so we recommend that this be taken very seriously, because the benefits of a really good health score are exponential, because you'll be ahead of the curve of a lot of issues, because eventually, if you keep refining them, you'll get to the level you can actually predict behavior of the customer based on what the health scores are telling you. The third one is using analytics to identify expansion opportunities and predict churn risk. Once you can predict, a range of possibilities are presented for improving not just the way CS interacts with the customer. Possibilities open for how CS can communicate more empirical evidence to the product team of reasons for customer churn. And so I think, it's one thing for customer success to say, we've reached a point where we can predict churn. That's great. And everyone should applaud that. But even more important would be helping the product team design products from the ground up that, as much as they can, avoid the conditions for eventual churn. And so that's something that's really hard to do, but that's something that has to happen, because there is a lot of criticism in our industry, especially in SaaS, that products get created without a lot of consideration for how those things play out in the market. And, seeds of churn, we like to say seeds of churn are planted during the onboarding and implementation, but I would go further and say they're planted during creation of the product. And so this is a way for customer success to participate in that remediation of churn at the earliest stages, is by working much more closely with the product team. Personalizing engagements based on customer behavior and usage patterns. The quote is, CS can improve the quality of product guidance by recognizing the story that might be hidden in the customer's product use. Are there patterns that can suggest there's a skills gap? This is something that I see sometimes, not as often as I would hope or expect, is that when we look at patterns of usage, we should be looking for ways that we can help the customer improve the way they get educated. We should be providing recommendations as customer success professionals, working with our customers and say, we noticed based on these usage patterns that typically tells us that there's kind of a weakness of knowledge in this particular area. We have ways to help you correct that. And this would be the benefit of you taking this particular training or learning this particular area of interest. And so this is the kind of outcome you would expect. So that kind of communication would be really powerful, I think, for customer success managers to understand how to do. And finally, on this topic, measuring and demonstrating the impact of customer success activities. The quote is, if it had, it would already be ahead of that requirement and would probably have been spared a lot of pain it has suffered recently. In that sense, CS has been its own worst enemy. And that quote is really with respect to the overall kind of struggle customer success has had in the last 20 years with measuring, as I said at the beginning, measuring the work it does and the product that it produces, which is successful customer outcomes. In the absence of measurement, people make their best guesses, and the people in control make the best guesses. And so they're the ones in charge of the finances. And so that's why I think customer success has struggled in the last 5 years, because a lot of times they just haven't produced the proof of impact. And so it's critical that customer success leaders, like here I am speaking to the leaders again, even though this book is for CSMs, the leaders read into that and say, okay, my number one job actually is not hiring CSMs. My number one job is not making sure a territory is provided service. My number one job is making sure, first of all, I understand how to measure all that stuff. What's the impact of good hires? What's the impact of good process? And what's the impact to the company when certain percentage of customers achieve their successful outcomes? What's the impact when information flows back to the product team that helps them improve the product? So that's what we're talking about when we talk about measuring and demonstrating the impact of customer success activities. Checking time. Okay, doing all right. So optimizing the customer journey. So streamlining onboarding processes to drive initial value. The quote from the book is, onboarding necessitates a delicate balance between structure and flexibility. Establishing a framework with repeatable processes ensures consistency, efficiency, and scalability across customer interactions. So clearly in this situation, we're talking about making sure that the customer during the onboarding process, going back to what I said earlier about this is the moment where they're most inspired. You want to make sure you're reducing the possibility of friction as much as possible. So you want to make the onboarding process smooth, as smooth as it can possibly be. So that's why customer success should be at the forefront, making sure that the customer feels well taken care of, that they know the entity. I mean, it might be a lower touch segment, but if they know someone they can reach out to, a body, email address, someone they can kind of contact, it would minimize some of the potential friction that can disrupt and derail the onboarding process, which eventually really increases the likelihood of churn if onboarding kind of stumbles and fails. Second one is implementing engagement strategies to boost ongoing adoption. Driving engagement as a CSM can be incredibly rewarding, both professionally and personally. When you successfully engage customers, guiding them to realize the full potential of your product, you witness their achievements and growth firsthand. And if you're authentic and you're real about why you're in this profession, there's no better reward than seeing your customer achieve their outcomes, because that's a significant accomplishment for them and also for you, for the work you've done. And that's the moment where you should be most applauded, is when those customers really do achieve their objectives and are positioned for the next level of growth with your company. Building referenceable customers and advocates. The quote is, building a roster of referenceable customers who are willing to collaborate with other customers like them extends your value beyond your product or service. What do we mean by that? We mean that ideally you'll want a community of advocates out there. And so there's the formal communities that can build with community software and platforms, and those are great. But you can even do that without that. If you have consistent ability to work with customers to help them achieve their successful outcomes, organically, you'll have a community of customers who will probably more authentically advocate for you based on their experience. And it'll be kind of a perpetual motion machine. The more successful you are at the processes that guide customers towards successful outcomes, the more successful that ball will start rolling, where essentially what you're doing is you're enhancing your brand, your company's brand in the marketplace. It's more than just whatever the slick product says, whatever marketing says the slick product does. It's actually about the service that the customers receive on the end of that process. Finally, focusing on retention and expansion throughout the life cycle. Retention and expansion are rightfully very visible board level metrics, but they are, on a very personal level, the metrics that can showcase the excellence of individual CSMs. Now, we don't mean to place a lot of burden on CSMs, but retention and expansion are basically in the job profile of CSMs. Those are two key things you're responsible for. And we can argue about any sort of financial kind of assignment there, whether you get assigned quota or not. You're still responsible for expansion, in the sense that you have to set up the right environment for the customer to be ready to expand, whether you're quoted or not, whether you're given formal assignment for being responsible for expansion. You still have to get the customer to a point where they're successful, that they're ready to expand, that they want to expand with you. And so optimizing the customer journey is all these things. And customer success managers need to always be paying attention to these various aspects of the customer journey. And of course, there's more to it. But AI tells me this is what the major points are in our book. And so I'm just kind of like going along with the flow here, what they say. Finally, the last theme that it came up with was the future of customer success. Embracing AI, automation, and emerging technologies are things that customer success industry is doing a good job of. We see that widely deployed technologies across the industry to varying extents. But my concern I think I have with AI is it's not as systemic as it needs to be. I feel that too many customer success organizations are treating AI too much on an individual basis. They're not formalizing and centralizing the strategies around generative AI, for example. And this is part of my core argument for why CS operations should be a bigger thing. I know it is growing, but I think CS operations should be probably at one of the top things that CS organizations build going forward, is to really kind of strengthen that function. because there's no going back to the time when customer success was really strictly about conventional high-touch service for just strategic customers. I can't see that being a really good value play for companies to do, because that means that the company has to take a bet on a small segment of its customer base as being going to provide them good revenue going forward 5, 10 years. And with the state of the economy and the state of society, it's hard to make a bet, an educated bet these days, on saying we're going to bet our future as a company on 15% of our customer base, and we're going to pay most of our service attention to them. And we're going to allow our CSMs to be really personal in the way they approach providing service to those customers, and they can, test and embrace AI to whatever level they want to embrace. So that's, to me, a recipe for failure. And I recommend that CS operations take the forefront in almost all situations, and really be responsible for developing technology strategy for the entire CS organization, and figure out how AI and automation and any other technologies can be better utilized across the board. Because ultimately what you're talking about is customer experience needs to be consistent. It needs to reflect your brand. It needs to be something customers don't have to think too hard about. And that means standardization as much as possible in terms of the delivery of service. So in the book, we kind of call it automate, augment, and analyze. Routine tasks should be ripe for automation. You should look at what those things are. You can eliminate hours spent on repetitive, tedious tasks, and you have more time left for high impact work. Augment. Some functions are not meant to be replaced, but augmented. And so you shouldn't just go in and throw everything out. You should actually look at one's processes that are valuable already and weigh whether they should just be augmented. And so AI tools can be seen as a creative partner in those situations, and personalization engines can help deliver new brand experiences and impact the customer in kind of new ways without ripping and replacing. Finally, analyzing. AI can analyze vast amounts of information to uncover the hidden patterns. We already talked about that earlier in the presentation, and insights that would take humans months or even years to produce. As I said at the beginning, this AI read the whole book in 15 seconds and produced themes. So pretty good way to think about how AI can help rather than replace the role. The next point is scaling to manage larger customer portfolios efficiently. And in the book, it says, we shouldn't be surprised to learn of CSMs and the new models that are responsible for driving success to hundreds of customers. And I've met CS leaders who have CSMs who are responsible for hundreds of customers. I think that's going to become more and more the norm. I don't see companies going back to a day where they could have CSMs being hired that would be responsible for small numbers of clients, unless they do have big enough teams that you have a few CSMs who are focused on, again, the most strategic customers. But by and large, I think CSMs should be ready to use systems and technology to service hundreds of customers. And there's going to be a bargain made in that case, because customers who are at the receiving end of that large scale kind of effort, their expectations are similar to the ones who are getting high service. They want good service that's going to move them forward towards getting value from their investment. That's essentially what they want. So the onus is on CSMs, or CS, I should say, not just CSMs, but to figure out how that can be delivered at scale. This is something that CS has struggled with for a long time. Good progress has been made, but I would say still there's a lot of work to be done to be able to kind of achieve that level of scale. Let's see. Evolving CSM roles to be more strategic and business focused. So in the book, we say more strategic thinking CSMs will force CS leaders to become even more strategic. than they are today. So they will need to become more business analytical and more responsible for interpreting corporate strategy and inter-organizational requirements into projects and initiatives. So what we mean by that is this is really an expectation that we should expect to see unfold, that the leaders, CS leaders, there's going to be more responsibility for them to get much better, much better at becoming business leaders than they are today. So they're going to be responsible for making sure that the large corporate level strategy that is articulated by the executive team is somehow kind of put into play at the team level. And I know that's not easy. I've been in that role many times, and but if you don't have that curiosity to be able to kind of look at a big thing and figure out a small thing, then you're probably in the wrong role. If you focus too much on the small things all the time, you're probably not fulfilling your role as a CS leader. That's why you have people who are working on projects and stuff to deliver those small things that fit into the bigger puzzle that you are responsible for. That's kind of what we mean there. Developing new skills in data analysis, AI utilization, and technology. The evolving landscape of CS that you've just been reading about in this chapter will require CSMs to think and behave differently. It will require them to develop a more diverse skill set than that which was common in the older conventional models. And so this is where I typically say to an audience, customer success will become even more scientific than the art form it has been up to now. And the art is it's been more reliant on emotional kind of connection with customers and personalized service. And while those are good things, it doesn't satisfy the large business objectives of deriving and extracting revenue from the customer base on an ongoing basis. And so it's going to require CSMs to hone and evolve their skills with data analysis and obviously AI utilization, but figure out how you can look at information and see patterns for yourself. AI can help you there, of course, but you have to have that natural curiosity to want to be able to kind of see, how can I help a whole segment of my portfolio? I'm responsible for 200 customers. Which ones are being successful and why are they successful? So I'll be able to kind of ask questions of data that's there and trying to glean insights that you can kind of action after that. And finally, shifting organizational models to be more customer-centric. So customer-centric companies understand that the more they can orient all their work of all organizations in terms of producing downstream benefits for the customer, as opposed to focusing on benefits solely for the company, the brighter the company's future will be. So I'm kind of looking around my camera there. But that's all to say that customer-centric companies is more than just a phrase. It has to be a lived expression. And what that means is that you have it within yourself to say your organization is going to be customer-centric in the way you behave internally. And so you think, in my opinion, customer success is most successful when they put the customer first, not the company first. If you put the customer first, a lot of other things take care of themselves. And so I think the future of customer success will be more about that mindset. And you might say, doesn't that put us at odds with the rest of the company? Perhaps, but I would say that puts you in a position to educate the rest of the company. And this is something I've long argued, that customer success should be the instrument of change for a company. It should be the transformation agent that learns from the customer base, understands what success looks like, and turns around and educates the rest of the company on how it can improve the way it does its work. So that's my presentation. That's my AI assisted presentation. I hope it was useful to you. I'm happy to kind of entertain questions. And Corey, what do you think?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Peter. We have had some questions come in, but I do want to invite everyone else to please go ahead and submit your questions, and we'll see how many we can get to. So our first question says, The biggest challenge we face is how do we ensure we are getting the right desired outcome that will actually impact renewal? What strategies as leaders should we focus on to drive renewal?
Well, the right outcomes are whatever the customer wants as the result of working with you as a vendor. So I don't mean to be glib with that response. What I'm saying is that customers, educated customers, should know why they bought a product. What are they trying to solve in their business environment? And they should be able to kind of distill that down to some specific kind of objectives. And those become outcomes, should become outcomes that can formulate this, the basis of a success plan. And so if those things are achieved, and oftentimes all you have to do is make a lot of progress towards those achievement, the odds of renewal increase a lot. And so I think if you're interested in making sure you're focused on the right outcomes to have the best chance of renewal, it starts with the customer. It starts with the information they're providing for you through sales, not necessarily just through customer success. I would say the seeds of renewal start with the sales team setting up the right honest conversation with prospects about what the company can do to help them and what the end result should look like for them in terms of their change to their business. And that flows through. And so renewal should be easier if information is clear, both sides. So the customer agrees, yes, okay, you've listened to us properly. This is exactly what we want. And we agree after a year or 2 years, if that's how things look, then we will renew. It should be that easy. But it requires things that I talk about in the book, that Jeff and I talk about in the book, which is honest conversations, communications clarity, really detailed plans and all that kind of stuff, that the fundamentals of customer success.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We have a question here that says, why do you think companies call their team customer success managers instead of account managers? And I know you've been in the industry for a while and probably have seen this evolution. So what do you see as the differences there?
I think it's first of all, it's like an evergreen question. It's been going back a long time. And I would say the answer is always the same. It's about perspective. So, put yourself in the customer's seat. If you are told, here's your account manager, or here's your customer success manager, I think immediately you have perception differences there. And so I'll elaborate a little bit more what I mean by that, but the customer's perception is account manager means something for the vendor. Customer success manager, just by its naming, means there's probably something of benefit for me here. So there's that. But if you've worked in companies where both roles exist, and there can be a lot of overlap, but I've been in large organizations, worked in large organizations where that overlap can coexist and be complementary. What account managers have always focused on is how do we look at our territory, our accounts, and understand what the next year's revenue possibilities are. And so that's how they start their planning, is we need to increase our revenue 15% from our customer base in this segment. Account managers participate. What are your strategies going to be to help companies work towards opening up their wallets in that case? And I'm not saying that they're not honest. I think I've worked with tons of really good account managers who honestly are excellent at their job at developing a plan with customers to educate them and let them know we can help you achieve your goals. And at the end of this process, we'll have a contract with you that you'll expand your revenue with us. But the account managers aren't responsible for a lot of that stuff happening that helps them get towards those goals. Customer success managers start their planning with, what does the customer want? what's the outcome that they need. And so I'd say that's the easiest way to look at the difference. I'm 100% opposed to talk a lot of talk these days. I call it a surrender, where people say, why don't we just get rid of customer success and have account managers? I think that's a shame. I think you're abandoning your customers at that point and just really going with whatever your illusions are of driving revenue. And it's not about the customer success at that point.
Yeah. Thanks for that comparison, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Could you elaborate on the strategies that CSMs can use to turn a customer crisis into an opportunity to kind of strengthen the relationship and build on trust?
Well, I think the answer is right in the question, which is you have to figure out how to turn that crisis situation around so that what emerges on the back end is something better from the customer's point of view. And so I think Jeff wrote that chapter, but we both have involvement in what we talked about. And I've been in those situations 100 times where it can be made much worse. The situation can be much worse depending on how the CSM handles it. If the customer gets a sense that the CSM isn't taking it as seriously as the customer feels it needs to be taken care of, that's a problem. If the customer feels that progress is not being made, that's a problem. So what I'm saying is that it's hard. The CSM needs to be able to understand what's important for the customer. And oftentimes it boils down to, yes, fixing the situation, but sometimes it boils down to keeping them informed and being honest with them about timelines and progress and communicating on a regular basis. I've had customers with really thorny issues. I've worked in large environments with very complicated inter-product challenges, integration challenges. And sometimes these things take a year, 18 months to resolve. You get them to a point sooner rather than later, where they can do work, but it's not the way they envisioned it. But if you keep them informed and involved, that lowers the temperature significantly. And what ends up happening is, if it eventually gets solved, which it typically does, is that they emerge, there's more trust at that point. And I think that's what you want as a CSM. And at the end of that process, you want a happy customer, and happy doesn't mean delightful. It just means they trust you more. And I think that's ultimately what you want.
Yeah, I think that's some good advice for managing those situations. We have a question that says, often organizations say they are customer centric, but continue to put the company first, not their customers. How would you approach the execs to change their mindset around this?
Well, this is where I challenge CS leaders a lot. Is one skill they need to get way better at is storytelling, and in a concise and really compelling manner. And I know that's not simple. I don't even think I do it really well, but I've done it a lot. And I think sometimes if you set it up in your mind, put it down on paper, this is what I need to say, this is how I'm going to say it. I've got 15 minutes to say it, and I'm going to say it in a compelling way that hits at what's important for them. So let's say, and I have been in this situation where you get invited to a senior level executive meeting, C-level meeting, and they've given you, as the representative of the post-sale world, 15 minutes to talk about what's right and what's wrong. You've got only 15 minutes to tell the story about why the lack of customer centricity is screwing up the entire business. And so you need to be able to describe pretty compellingly how the absence of customer centricity affects the entire flow of information that goes through the company, how balls get dropped all the time, how friction gets created. What that means for the customer on the back end of that is profound. And you can even include a few quotes from customers I've found that kind of powerful kind of messaging, short, clipped, with really striking kind of imagery, um, invite you for another audience, get you an invitation for another audience, a longer discussion, where you can elaborate on what your ideas might be for fixing that.
Great. Yeah, I don't think that's an easy task, but I think you gave some good advice there. We have a kind of a common question that says, the CS role feels very unappreciated. How do we stand out for all the work we do?
So honestly, it is underappreciated compared to the rest of the company. But it really does depend on the company. I think some companies do an amazing job of recognizing CES's role as being just as vital as any other role in the customer lifecycle. And so, that's how I think you should approach this as a CSM, that you're one piece of the customer's life cycle. You're not I mean, formally you are a piece of the company's life cycle process, but it's better to think of it as the customer life cycle from birth to, let's not call it death, but let's call it renewal.
Mhm.
And that you're on the side, you're on the end of it, that's going to make sure the customer feels that entire process was worth it. That they've navigated through all these functions to gather information that they hoped would be valuable for them, and eventually secured some sort of a solution to their problem that they hope is going to work, and that customer success is the one that marshaled the resources to make sure that it came true. And so I think that's how I think that's how respect comes for customer success, is to deliver the service that's expected of it consistently. And yeah, there's a lot of pressure these days on renewal numbers, because churn is, it's been rising. But it's unfair that some companies like to blame one entity for that. That's just not the way things work. And so I think that if that's largely happening, it's just a failure of the executive team to appreciate what the life cycle is of a customer, and what matters along the way, and that no role is better than the other role, and that they all are pretty much equal. And so I think it's hard. It's a hard road to kind of navigate as a CSM, because yeah, it feels like you're not getting the respect. But all I can say is that just keep doing your job, and you do it well, and respect comes, especially if your leadership, your CS leadership, improves the way they can tell stories to the senior management team, executive team, about why outcomes matter, why the delivery of outcomes matter. Not so much just why the organization matters, but why outcomes matter to customers and what that means for the company's future revenue potential. They've got to be able to kind of tell that story.
Yeah, well, I agree with everything you said there. And I think it also plays into the things you talked about earlier about the differences between account management and CS, and the importance there. So thank you for that. Let's see. Maybe we have time for one more question. In your experience, what are some of the common roadblocks that CSMs encounter that CS leaders can prepare for?
I would say the roadblocks are usually to do with technical problems with the product. And that's something I think CS leaders should be doing more to help smoothen. And so, it's not fair, I think, to expect a CSM to handle all the friction of the customer's response to a broken product, while at the same time struggling to move another organization and have them move their priorities around to fix your problem with your customer's problem. I think that's unfair. I think there's work to be done at the senior leader level to fix that situation. And sometimes that means it takes time to to rejig the way things work. And that maybe certain kind of patterns of support cases indicate support problems, like staffing problems, or it could mean product problems. But regardless, I think there's a significant role for the leader to play in those situations to remove the roadblock by being at the forefront of clearing the systemic problems that's causing that roadblock. Yeah, I mean, I've never been a leader to leave CSMs on their own to deal with a systemic problem that's happening in another organization. It's just not, that's a failure.
Yeah. Well, I think that's some really great advice for leaders there. So thank you so much, Peter. And thank you everyone for joining us today. As a reminder, we will be sending out an email tomorrow with a link to the recording and a PDF of the slides that you can view again. And please check out Peter's new book. And there will be a survey that pops up at the end of this. If you would take just a moment to provide your feedback, would really appreciate it. And thank you again, and have a great rest of your day, everyone. And thanks again, Peter.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Corey. Really appreciate it.
Bye.